And welcome back to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be working more on our bounty hunter's den. We're going to be building out details for the den and making this model look really great. So let's get started. And welcome back. So it's good to have you here. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate everybody tuning into these tutorials and really hope you're enjoying this new series and hope it's going well for you. If you have any questions, you run into problems, just drop it in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to everybody. It's still early days for the channel, so there's not too many comments. I can manage it all. We'll see if things keep growing. It might get more difficult, but I'm going to still keep trying my best to just answer as many questions as I can and help everyone out. Here we are in Blender. Now, today's an exciting day because today's my first day with Blender 2.8. 2. So yeah, if you've got Blender 2.81, I'm using the next version. So I'm ahead of you. Best way to download that, of course, just to go to blender.org and download the latest version. Just open that up and then you can open up your project file. Everything will come right over. Let's get to work on making this room look amazing. So today's objective is to add the detail. So we've got the base room figured out. We've got our door figured out. We've got this thing working. We've got the scale set. Now we're just going to really bring it to life. Now, one thing I want to do just to start off with was I had this idea later that actually this would look a lot better with a bit of a bevel. So we're going to add a bevel modifier to our floor object. It's going to pop that in the top slot. So it's the first thing that happens before the arrays happen. If you want to find out more about modifiers, check out my procedural sci-fi tutorial series. There's a great one there about talking about modifiers and how they all work and the stack and stuff. You can find it in the link in the comments below, or I'll put a little card up on the screen somewhere. So yeah, I'm sure you can see that. Do something about like maybe 0.04 looks pretty good. And bevels are great because they just catch the light. So it really helps add to the realism of an object if it's got a bevel, because nothing's actually like a perfect edge. So if we've got perfect edges in our scene, it's going to kind of hurt our realism. Okay, so first thing let's do is kind of make this room look a bit more Star Warsy. Right now it's just sort of this big blank smooth space. I've got this reference photo from the theme park at Disney World. And you can see there's like all these really cool kind of like, bits and bobs, like these pillar things and just the architecture, the way it has just lots of facets and interest. Jump into edit mode for our main object. Now, in order to get this to work, we're gonna have to delete some faces, but I'll show you what I'm talking about in a second. So if we just hold down Alt and then click on one of these edge loops, we're gonna get this nice big continuous arc. And we can use that to make some pillars. And because we've gone to the effort to make really nice geometry, then this is going to work out really well. Okay, so one problem with these edge loops, we can't just extrude this out because we're actually also selecting the loops on the outside because we've got a perfectly looped object. So what I'm going to do is switch to transparent mode. And I'm just going to select the bottom ring of faces, and I'm going to delete those faces for now. We'll put them back in later, but for now, we're just going to delete those. So that way, if I loop select, I'm just going to be getting the inside. So that's just a bit helpful. So I'm going to select this one. Also, I'm going to make my camera view focal length a bit wider. I'll switch to 24 so I can just see a little bit better. I'll skip 2 and then I'll do that one, and then I'll skip 2 more and I'll do that one. So yeah, now I've got these 3 kind of pillars. And then I'll also do a loop around the roof kind of up here. And then what we're going to do is hit I, and we're going to inset, just move it a little bit. You want to be careful up here. Just watch these edges don't get too bunched up because that can cause some issues. And then we're going to hit E to extrude and then S to scale and bring it all in like this, just so it's a nice thickness. And then we're going to hit I again to inset, and we're just going to drag that again, watching up here, making sure we don't intersect or overlap with that inset. And then what we can do is we can control click or alt click these interior places and hit I again, just to inset those. Just do that with these guys too. All right, so now if we jump out of edit mode and we increase our subdivision surfaces, you see we get this really nice kind of look. I think I might actually bring these guys down. Switch to transparent view, and I'll just focus in on that, figure out which bit we need to grab to do this. Those 2, yep. And then with all of them selected, I can hit G and Z to grab and just pull them down. Okay, so next I want to consult some of my reference images. I just went online and browsed around and found a bunch of cool stuff. And I thought this was a really nice image that looked like something that reminds me of Star Wars. So I'm trying to think of like, why does this remind me of Star Wars? Why does this make me think of that world and that universe? If I grab over one of these blow up images from The Mandalorian, you can see like a similar kind of switch box kind of thing. And I think the common thing, and grab this one too, you can see right here, this like, like doorbell call thing on the outside. But we've got boxes, we've got little buttons with lights, and we've got pipes that are kind of bolted to things. And I think that's why this reminds me of it as well. The sort of scruffy, grimy wall and just everything scratched and dirty and, this rough edge. I mean, that's very Star Wars too. So I think those are kind of the cues that are really making me think of that universe. There's also a bit of a color palette thing going on. So you can see here, we've got this like light blue and these bright red pinpricks, light blue, greenish blue kind of color grade that they've got going on. But this whole like bright red pinprick kind of thing is very Star Wars. You see it all over the place. So if we just use a few of these and, kind of keep to this palette and create a couple of, boxes like this, we should be able to continue to reinforce the style so that it starts looking more and more like it belongs in that universe. And I'm going to create a new collection, and I'm going to call this collection our room. And I'm going to grab those objects, the room, the great floor, the floor runner, door frame, and base floor. I'm going to grab them all and drag them into my collection. So now in our reference objects collection, we just have the hollow table and then our door reference, which we don't need anymore. So I can delete that door reference. And and I'm also going to turn off the room and the door blades for now. In fact, we're going to put door blades into the room so we can turn them all off together. Okay, now right here, we're going to create a new mesh cube, and I'm going to center it out. So my 3D cursor is not in the center of my scene. In fact, I've got it turned off. So let me turn that back on so we can see it. Where is it? 3D cursor, there we go. Let's go ahead and get some modeling going. So got my little reference image. We can bring these references images like into Blender itself. You can actually just drag and drop. Like, check this out. Boop. It's really far away. That's hilarious. So yeah, there you go. I'm not going to like model directly on top of this though. So how cool is that though? You can just drag and drop. Thanks to, who is it? Markham 3D in the comments who tipped me off about that. I never knew about it. Anyways, yeah, go check out his channel. He's got really, really cool stuff. He does a lot of reviews on plugins and stuff for Blender. Very helpful. All right, so here we go. Let's get our cube going. So I'll scale it up on the Z like that. I'm going to maybe do a longer box with maybe a few button interfaces. I'll go ahead and hit Control B to bevel. And I'm going to bevel this just a little bit so that our edges have that kind of faceted look, which really helps to the realism. I'm going to grab this face and I'm going to hit I to inset. Again, with inset, remember, you can grab that face and you hit E and then S to scale, and it's going to be doing the same thing, okay? It's just I just shortens that process. It just makes it a bit easier just to do one button press as opposed to two. But, nitpicks, doesn't really matter. That's probably pretty good. I'll hit E to extrude, and I will grab it on the X and drag it in. Not too far, but yeah, something like that. That's pretty good. Okay, I'm not going to use a subdivision surface modifier in this guy, so I'm not going to worry about doing little inset edges, but I will bevel these two loops so that the, again, for the lighting. So Control B to bevel. We'll just do that. And then same for this one. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create like a panel that we can kind of iterate on and make a few different ones really easily. So we're going to use a particle system, kind of like we did in the last tutorial series, the Blade Runner scene where we created the giant city. If you haven't checked that one out, link in the description below. Check out the card. It'll get you there. It's really worth your time. All right. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to create a couple of loop cuts here, maybe like 4, and we'll do the same across the middle like that. So about 3 there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select the vertices in the middle. So just select all these guys, and we're going to make these into a vertex group. So you click on this little green tab here, and this is where we can add a vertex group. So I'm going to click on this to create a group. I'm going to call it panel And I'm going to click assign. And that's going to assign these vertexes to this vertex group. You know you got it right. If over here, select, deselect, you can hit deselect. It'll deselect the vertexes in this group, and hit select again. It'll select just the ones in this group. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a particle system, and we're going to create some buttons that we can emit on the surface of this guy. So let's go ahead and make a few buttons. So I'm going to hit mesh, out of edit mode, hit mesh, and sphere or cylinder, grab it on the Y just so we can see it. This doesn't matter where it's positioned. I'm going to rotate on the Y 90. Actually, that's probably more vertices than we need. So I'm going to create another cylinder. I'm going to just pop this down maybe to, I don't know, 19, 20. 20 is probably good. Yep. Once you move it, you lose that that option to change those vertices. All right. Also, I want to move my origin so that it's at the base of my object here. So I could do a couple of different ways. What I'm going to do is just look at it from the side, and I'm just going to, in edit mode, drag the base of it just so it's lined up visually, more or less. I'll give it a little bit of overlap so it intersects the geometry. Because when it emits as a particle, it's going to emit using that origin as the base point. So any geometry that's behind the origin will emit within the box here, the control panel. Okay, so let's create a new particle system. So click on the particle tab with your box selected. And we're going to hit the plus key to create a new particle system. We can call this one, what are we going to call this? Panel. All right, physics. We're going to turn off physics because we don't want these buttons flying all over the place. We're going to emit everything on frame -1, and we'll stop on frame 0. So that way, when our timeline starts, they're all there. Okay, so we're going to emit 1,000. No, we don't need that many, but that's all right. We'll leave that for now. Lifetime, I'm going to make it just 600. Just so it's longer than our timeline. And let's pick render object. We're going to select an object, and we're going to use this cylinder. So I can just eyedrop the cylinder. There we go. And now we have all these guys on here. We're going to use the object rotation. So it inherits the rotation that we have in our particle object. And I'm going to drop the number right down. And then I'm going to also change the scale. So I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to come down here to vertex group. And for density, I'm going to select panel, which is our vertex group that we made. And now you can see they're emitting just from that vertex group. But I can do even more than that now. I can actually go over here, back up to the top. A lot of scrolling up and down with particles. Back up to the top where it says source. It's underneath here, emission. Click source. We're going to emit from faces. That's fine. But distribution, I want to go grid. And actually, now that's going to do everything. I want to, this for some reason, when you switch it from faces to the grid, it ignores your vertex group if you're using the emitter system as opposed to the hair. I'm not sure why it does that. If we switch to verts, it is going to follow it. And that's actually what we want. We want to use the verts. Let's change the scale a bit so these guys aren't as big. Where are we? Bingo. Now we got some buttons. All right. Now what we're going to do is create a new collection, and we're going to call this collection buttons. And we're going to take our cylinder, and we're going to call this button dot 000, and we're going to put it in buttons. And now I want to add like a little base to this button. So I'm going to enter edit mode, and with edit mode selected, actually with let's see, I'll select that bottom face, and I'm going to hit F3, cursor to selected, and now I'm going to hit Shift A and cube, and this is going to create a cube within the mesh of this object. And scale that down, grab that on the X, scale that on the X. There we go. Scale that down. And you can see what's happening is it's ending up over here as well. So now we've got these nice little bases for our button object, which is pretty sick. I'm not going to worry about beveling because these are so small, again, because I just don't want to waste geometry. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take this and we can hit Shift D, just move it over. It doesn't matter where it's positioned in 3D space. We're just making another button. And so for this one, I'm going to select one of the vertices of our cylinder, hit L to select all for that object, everything that's connected. Again, when I say object, I mean that continuous piece of mesh within this mesh, because again, we're in edit mode. So if I'm going in edit mode, I've got basically two different mesh objects that are making up this one object. They're nested into each other. So I can hit X to delete these faces. So now I just have a square. And I'm going to make a square button. So I'll select all and hit Shift D, scale it down, and then grab it on the X so that it pokes out. Now I've got a square button. And now what we can do is over here on our object, Where we've got our emission object selected as button, we can just change this to collection and then select our buttons collection. Now it's going to use this whole collection. So everything that's in here is going to be used to emit. Now we're emitting so many that they're overlapping. So we need to adjust that by taking our number down. So now that we've got 2 buttons, we could add more. We could just keep going with this. We could maybe do a small button. So I might duplicate this one, grab it on the Y and scale this one down. So I've got like a small button. That's kind of cool. To get around this whole issue of if you use random order and it starts stacking them on top of each other. So you get like tiny button inside of a bigger button inside of another one. And it's just a lot of duplicated geometry that we don't need. You can untick random order, and now it's going to distribute them evenly, but it's also always going to distribute them in the same order. If I change the seed, you see they're just staying still. I can change the number of particles. So the way to get around that so you can create variety easily, if we fill up our button space, so we've got 12 vertices in our vertice group. So got my 12 spots. You can go down here to use count. And now by turning on the use count, you can do a couple of things. You could change the order of the different buttons. So I can now move my button 002, which is the little guy. I can move him up in the order. Another thing is I can change the count. So if I make this 2, we're going to have twice as many of the little buttons, and then we do the big ones. And that's going to also change things. So now that I've got that, I can move the order around again to get even more varieties. Another thing you can do is you can go in here and actually move these vertices. So we can hit double tap G just to slide these guys over. And that's going to move all of these guys. So you end up with cool little patterns like that. We'll go ahead and create some materials for all this stuff. So what I'll do, we don't have to do anything in it, but I'm just going to create 2 materials for each of these. They'll all share the base material, but I'll give them different button materials. Okay, so select all. I'm going to go to Material tab and click New. And I'll just call this one, we'll call it Button Base Metal now. And I'll do the same here, L, and then I'm going to go Button Base Metal, and I got to click Assign as well. So if I go back over to this one and then hit L to select all that, Button Base Metal, Assign, because then what I want to do is select that one, and I'm going to create a new material. So I hit plus and new, and this one I'm going to call, we'll call this one Red Button Glow. So I want this one to kind of emit a little bit into the scene, and I'm going to click Assign. So now if I hit deselect, when I select on Button Base Metal and I hit select, it's going to select the bit that this is assigned to. And this one here, I can hit select. That's a great way just to double check. And again, this is a lot like vertex groups. It's the same basic idea. We're assigning material to a specific vertex group. All right, red button glow. We can go ahead and just make this like a red as well, just so it's a little bit clearer. And I'm going to create a new material, and I'll call this one light blue. Actually, I'll do the same convention. So light blue button glow. And same over here. I'm going to add a new material. I'll just select base button metal and click Assign, create a new one, and I'll call this maybe I'll call this one green button glow. All right, so I've assigned materials for my 3 objects, and then I'm going to take my base panel object, and I'm going to select a new material, and I'm going to call this one panel metal. And we don't have to worry about assigning it because we're not putting it different ones on different faces. We're just going to use it on the one. Now, I'll show you how this works. We take select our master object and our panel one. We're going to hit Shift-T to duplicate because we're going to leave this one alone. This is going to be our iterator, where we use to create all these different variations. And with this one selected, I can go into my particle settings for this object, go into my modifier settings, sorry, and I can click on Convert. And now it's going to convert this particle system into actual objects. And here they are. Okay, now I can go into the particles and just delete this particle system off of this base object. Now I've got all these buttons selected. I want to go ahead and hit F3 to make them single users, because these are actually sharing, they're instances still of these base particle objects. Even though they're no longer particles, they're still instances of these because we haven't changed that yet. So if you go into edit mode, grab a face or something, you see it's going to affect all of these, even though these aren't particles. These are actually objects in our scene. So we want to make these single users so that we can manipulate them on their own. Also, so we don't end up with just like tons and tons of objects in our final scene. So what I can do is I can select these buttons, just hit Shift A. Actually, it's okay even if the base object's selected. Hit F3 and we're going to type, there it is, make single user. And selected objects. And then you want to make sure these first two are ticked. So when you first do it, it probably won't have anything ticked. I'm going to tick object, object data, and boom, you're good to go. Awesome. All right, so now these guys are single users. So if I go in here and tab in edit mode, it's not going to affect them. Likewise, if we do anything to these, it's not going to affect our base particles. Now you can select that little group and hit Control J to join. And now they're going to be one panel object. But importantly, this one panel object is going to have all these materials now assigned to it. Okay, so another thing I can do, which is kind of cool, is if I wanted to extend one of these, make it a bit of a bigger panel, I could hit Add Modifier and Add Array. And then I just want to move my particle system to be after the array. If you want to find out more about modifiers and learn about them in depth, check out my other tutorial series, the procedural sci-fi series. I've got it's a really big deep dive into modifiers and how they work. Anyways, what you can do is we can use relative offset, and then you can go on the Z or the Y, and you can stack up a bunch of these like that, and it's going to actually inherit the particle system throughout. Okay, to just see how these things are looking, I've just turned on the emission for each of these different glow materials. So I just click the emission color and just set a color for it. And I can also do the same now for the button base metal. So my base color, if I bring it down to like a dark kind of color like that maybe, and then also then grab my main object and go panel metal and drag that one down, really help those buttons pop out. So you can see, yeah, it's looking very, very cool. More importantly, very Star Wars. Another cool thing to do is you can stack up two array modifiers, one on top of the other, and set one to be your Z position and one to be your Y. So you can create really cool grids of objects. Okay, so I've made a whole bunch of different panels, a bunch of random different types. Yeah, I think this will be enough for me for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this whole little setup so that we can go back and build more if we decide that we need them. So what we can do is take each of our panels that we're going to keep. We'll keep those in the scene. Buttons, what we'll do is we're going to create a new collection, and we'll call this our panel generator. And in our panel generator, we'll grab the empty that is our reference object. We'll grab panel 1, which is our panel generator, and we'll call this generator so it's clear. And then what we can do is grab our 3 buttons and make sure the button collection is also in the panel generator collection. Now I can just hide all that and come back to it later if we want to. All right, so let's take our panels now and pop them into our room. And of course, the scale is going to be way off, but that's all right. A couple of things to help you, place these things easier. If you open up the side panel, you can turn on the little handles. And then what you want to do is, right now, it's set to the global coordinates, which correspond to the world. So you can see Y is this way, X is this way, and Z is up and down. But if you change this from global to local, now it's going to be pointing in the coordinates of the object itself. So it's local coordinates. And this pertains as well to the rotation. The other one that's really important is the full stop key or the period key on your number pad on your keyboard. That allows you to zoom into a specific object. If I've got like this object selected and I zoom in and I try to keep zooming in and zooming in, it's going to get harder and harder to zoom in because I'm now getting closer and closer to the origin of this object, and I can't really zoom any further. So selecting that something else, hitting full stop, sets that now as the center of your viewport. Okay, I've finished placing my objects. Now we might want more later, but for now this is a good kind of setup. I've just put them kind of around the room in some nice spots that make sense. So the next thing I want to do is make some cabling that's going to kind of fill the room. Now this technique we're going to use to kind of create cables that run from these boxes down along the walls into the floor. And then we're going to create the same cabling and just do a whole bunch of it snaking under the floor, okay? But before we do that, what I might do is actually go ahead and throw on a texture for the environment here, the actual building, so we can start to kind of begin to see where things are going. Okay, so with EV selected, I'm just going to give myself a texture for this. I might just go for a soft gray for now. I think that'll work pretty well. For my door, I want to go for something metallic and maybe a bit darker than the outside. Just going to turn metallic up here. For the blades, I want to, let's go for, I don't know, a similar color to the walls maybe, and we'll give them a bit of metal We're going to make them really rough. If I go ahead and throw a light in the scene now, grab a point light, and then increase the scale of that light, just go 1 meter, and then change my power to like 30 or something, 50 even. I might keep this in the scene for now, again, just to help us visualize as we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this grate material. I'm going to give it the same material that we have on the door frame, because it's nice to be able to like duplicate, have repeating materials to kind of create a look to your scene. We'll give this the same material that we have on our main room object. So I'll call this room Adobe material. Okay, because again, we're going to go for that kind of, I think we'll go for Adobe. I mean, the gray looks kind of nice, but it's a bit too Empire. You know what I mean? I don't know if we want to go for that. Anyways, all right. And then finally, if we grab our base floor object, I'm going to make it quite dark. And I think that's just going to be for a visual cue so that we can really make whatever's in here stand out. Okay, so let's get our cabling in place. So I'll hide our room. And I'm going to create a curve. Okay, I'll just create a Bezier curve. And actually, I will bring my room in because I want to be able to see the scale. I want to make sure I get the scale right with this because it's going to matter. And let's go ahead and move this Bezier curve over here to this object. We'll just start with this one. So I'm going to F3, snap cursor to active. And then I'm going to get this and go F3, snap object. Selected to cursor. Boom. There we go. Now I know you've probably all shouted at me in the comments already about the quicker way of doing that because I asked for it in the last episode. But I'm doing these tutorials all kind of in bulk in one go. Yeah, I'm not reading the comments and doing these, so unfortunately, any mistakes will be repeated for a while. But just to begin with, actually, I'm just going to sort of zero out all of its rotation. So if you grab, I'm going to grab this vertex. I'm going to turn on snapping, or you can just hold down the control key. But I'm going to turn on snapping. And I'm going to grab this, this guy on the Y, and I want to snap it to the front vertex. That's going to line these up perfectly. I'll grab one of these handles, again, grab on the Y. With snapping turned on, it's going to just get nice and straight for us. All right, cool. Now I'm going to turn snapping off, and I'm going to scale this one down, and I'll scale this one down. And now what I want to do is in the curve settings for the object, I'm going to go right over to geometry, and we are going to use the depth, and we're going to just expand out some depth. So you can see all it does is it just makes this thing a tube. I don't want it to be super high resolution. I might just keep it a real minimum, maybe just a resolution of 1, and that's going to create a 6-sided object. All right, so now we can just like rotate the whole object on the Y, 90. I'm just going to move this around until I've got it in the right spot for this object. Something like that, works pretty good. And then what we just need to do is go in here and use these handles to, actually, before I do that, I want to, because I don't want to have to like redo this every time. I'm just going to hit Shift D to duplicate this one, and I just grab them off to the side. Ooh, even before we do that, let's go ahead and assign a material to this before we get too crazy. So let's call this wire material. There we go. And I'll make it like a black. Okay, now we can Shift D, duplicate this guy, move him out of the way just so we've got something. And now we can jump in and edit mode and just position these so that we've got a nice natural look to the way it hangs. And that's pretty much it. If you need to add more, to add in like more curves and stuff, you can subdivide the curve by selecting all the points and hitting F3 and typing subdivide. And that will subdivide the curve and give you an extra point to play with. All right, another cool thing we can do is we can take, we can make some brackets for these wires, these cables. So if I take this, I'll select all of them and I'll hit F3 subdivide. And I'll just add in another, just one subdivision is fine, I think, for now. And I'm going to make one of these so that I've got it and I can use it. We can probably, just duplicate it and make more later. But what I want to do is I'm going to select this vertex. I'm going to go snap cursor, cursor to selected. So I get my 3D cursor right on that spot. And I'm going to hit Shift A, mesh, and cylinder. Not in edit mode. Get out of edit mode. Just go back into object mode. And I'm going to just make this thing be sort of the right size. And this is going to be like a little bracket that holds our wire. So if I go here and add in a material for this thing, and I'll call this wire bracket, give it like a black color. So we select the bracket first, and then we shift select the wire, go into edit mode, and make sure this vertex is selected, okay? And then we hit Control P in vertex mode and click Make Vertex Parent, okay? Now I can drop this one down. You can see now that this one's actually parented to the wire, but specifically it's parented to this vertex. So I can move this around now, and that bracket is going to follow it around wherever it goes. So that's really, really cool. Another great thing that you can do to make your life easier positioning these things, you select one of these vertices, you can actually turn on snapping and turn on face. And what you can do now is grab, and it's going to be basically latching onto whatever face is nearby. So if you hover it over anything, you can snap it onto individual faces. So that's a great little tip for just positioning these guys. You can also, when you've got a vertex selected, you can hit E to extrude, and that will add in a new one. Okay, so I finished placing all of my wires in the scene, and I've made a new collection called wall wires and just dropped them in along with the brackets into this collection. Now, I've got some cool variation. I've changed the variation of the thickness of some of these, again, just by using the depth modifier, the depth box here in underneath geometry when you click on one of these splines. And so that's allowed me to get some nice variation into different bits of wire, which looks really nice. Now, what I can show you next is I want to do the same thing, but have some large pipes kind of underneath down here. So I'm just going to open up my wall wires. I'm going to get my, actually, here we go. I put base wire in its own collection as well, so it just wasn't getting in the way. I'm just going to hit Shift D to duplicate this guy, drag him over, and I'm going to rotate him on the Y. And then for this, the pipes, I just want them to be thicker really. That's the main difference with these pipes. I'm just going to bring it up. Okay, cool. So now that I've made it, what I want to do is just drag it down. So grab it on the Z and just drag it right down onto the floor. And just, I'm going to put it right above the base floor object. So let it just sit right on there. And this way I can stick some lights in between the two, and these won't block all that light. What I can do now is I can duplicate this and then rotate it on the Z and just make a bunch of these kind of all through the space. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot, before we do that, we got to make sure we take the wire material off of these guys and give them their own pipe material. So I'll do that. Okay, now that I've got a pretty good network of pipes, I'm just going to vary the size of some of these by just changing the depth just on a couple of these so that there's just a little bit of size variation in the scene. All right, great. So now that we've got that sorted, we can go ahead and turn our grate back on. There we go. And now we can take our material for the pipes, and we'll just darken it up so that it's not quite as dark as this, but just a little bit of difference. So there we go. So our scene's really coming together. Here we've got this cool looking crazy thing in the center of this picture, which to me feels really cool and really neat. And I think it'd be really fun to have something right up in the middle of our room. What we're going to do is go ahead and hide our room, and we can hide our pipes and wall wires as well. And we can create a new collection, and we'll call this light fixture. And then we can create a cylinder, and we'll stick it with, I don't know, yeah, 20 is good. I just want to make sure it's divisible by 2. That's the main thing. So got one there, divisible by 2. And actually, I'll put the room back on just so we can make sure that it looks good in context. Yeah, cool. All right, that's good. Now we can hide the room. All right, so let's pop into edit mode, grab the bottom face that's here, and we're just going to hit delete face. And then we can go into orthographic mode. All right, so in edit mode, now let's create a plane. And we're just going to scale him down and line him up. We just want to rotate this. So one of the things I'm looking at is that these points on this square don't line up exactly with one of these vertices. So what I can do is just rotate this cylinder until it does actually line up with a point on the vertices. So if I rotate 45 degrees, now this one's lined up here, and grab Z, bring it right up to here. And then I can just hold down, grab Z and hold down Control, turn on snapping, and just to snap that there. So now our normal's facing the wrong way, so we could recalculate, or we could just rotate on the X 180. Select him, and we're going to go F3 subdivide. One more, 4. There we go. F3 bridge edge loops. I'm going to turn on smooth modification. What's this called? Smooth editing? Proportional editing. That's right. And I'm going to grab on the Z. And if you use your mouse wheel, you can roll down and basically determine how many other bits you want to impact. So the closer they are to the center, the more that they're going to be impacted. And the further away they are, the less they're going to be impacted. So I'm just going to drag that out. Something like this. I'm just trying to create like a nice rounded shape. Okay, and I'll create one more edge loop up here at the top, just to kind of make it nice and firm. And I can go and get rid of this face because we're never going to need it. There we go. Go back to selection mode. Select some edge loops like this and hit I to inset, E to extrude, and turn proportional editing off. Okay, and then I might just create 2 edge loops here. And then I'm going to hit I to inset, bring it in, and then E to extrude and scale out. And then I to inset again. All right, cool. So now we can Shift D, scale this down, and just make a few of these. Cool. So now the last thing to do is just to put in some wires hanging down from these guys. So we use the same technique we were using before with our wires. So I can turn pipes and wall wires back on. All right, cool. So I've placed switched a bunch of wires around. I've just rotated them and scaled them in different ways just to make a big mess of wires. Now I've also darkened up the material just to kind of help it blend in a bit. And one cool idea I had was if we take this, we can actually take the center one and add in a particle system and go back and select our panel particles. And if we set this to faces and jittered, we can actually just use these guys. And you may have to adjust the scale in the instance collection here under the render. You can adjust the scale so they're not too big. And I won't assign it to all of them. I'll just do a few just so it's got some there. That's kind of nice. And then last thing might even be to take our floor object and do the same. So if we select on particle settings, we can select panel. And then for this one, we can just increase the number a whole lot. Okay, now that we've accomplished all of that, let's go ahead and create a new collection for our light fixture. We've got one. So let's put all of our wires that belong to the light fixture, and we're going to drag them out of here and pop them into light fixture. And we can turn off our base wire. Now, last thing we can do is just kind of set a mood, because the next step for us is to begin to really flesh out our materials. And so we want to go ahead and start thinking about how we're going to light this scene so we can create materials that look good within that lighting context. So I'm going to just take our reference objects and I'm going to turn our hollow table back on. It's the only reference object we actually have left. I'll take in here, I'll go ahead and give him a material that kind of fits what kind of material we'll use. I'm planning on having 2. So one that's going to be on the outside, that'll be like a metallic material. And then this one here, in fact, I'll go ahead and, this is just temporary. I'll just extrude those and I'll create a new material here. And this is going to be our hollow table or hollow base. So first thing we can do is go to our world and we can drop our world color all the way down to black and then head up to our Eevee render settings and click on Bake Indirect Lighting. And I'm going to create a new collection called Lights. Pop that in there. And I'm just going to hit Shift D and duplicate this. And I'm going to put one right down underneath. You can see what effect we get. It's nice. We cast these shadows up across the walls. Let's take our main light and let's drop it down. So instead of being so bright, let's take it down to like 10. And now you can really start seeing how this scene's going to come together. I'm going to take this light that I have under the ground. I'm going to make this a bit of a blue color like that. And then I'm going to duplicate it, Shift D, grab it on the Y, and I might put this one right here in the back. I might keep it right in the middle. Just like that. That's pretty good. And then Shift D again, and now I'm going to Shift Z so it doesn't move on the Z axis. I'm going to position this one right before this panel. And I'm going to make this one like a bit of a red color. Grab it on the Y, pull that right over there. And grab this one and Shift D, grab it on the Y. And then to help kind of bring out the door, what I'll do is I'm going to grab the blue one that we have here. I'm going to Shift D, bring that up on the Z, grab that back on the X so it's just in there. I feel like this ceiling's a bit too high. Like we got too much of a gap here between the door and the ceiling. And turn on transparent mode and just hit B to select, and we're going to select all of those faces. S and Z I'm going to be able to flatten out the roof, but I can also grab on the Z and just bring it down like this. So we can collapse the room, go to light fixture and select objects and just grab that on the Z. And we can just bring them down. We can even scale this up a bit, I think. Okay, one last thing we can also do if we wanted to kind of add even more detail is to select our room object. And with this top roof already selected, we hit Control minus. So now what we can do is we can create a vertex group out of this. So switch to vertex mode. Make sure we've got the right vertexes selected and click plus here to add a new one. And we call this roof. And once we create this roof group, we got to remember to also click assign to assign those vertexes. Then you know it's working if you hit deselect and select, and you can see them pop back and forth. Particles, and click new to create a new particle system. Call this roof pipes. You can see where I'm going with this. Frame start, -1, frame end 0, lifetime 600. And we will go down here to, faces is fine. Let's set our density vertex groups to be roof, and then go right up here to emitter, where are we? Render, yep. And select collection, and then select our pipes collection. So this is going to select the collection of pipes down here at the floor. Then we can just bring up this scale, and suddenly we've got all these pipes up on our roof. Okay, so we've finished modeling our space. I hope you found this tutorial really interesting and fun and exciting, and you're learning a lot. So the next step for us is to build our hollow table and create some animation for that. So those are going to be our next steps. Then we can bring everything over into Unreal and get our VR scene complete. So please, if you like this tutorial, hit the like button and feel free to subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications so you can find out when the next one drops. And just stay tuned. I'm going to keep pumping these out, and hopefully you're really enjoying it and excited about where you can take these ideas and these concepts in your own projects. So once again, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next tutorial. See ya.